conversation and perspective exchange in how data literacy happens in organizations like NASA, and how we can learn some lessons and use those in healthcare organizations. So, David, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Norma. First off, let me say what an honor it is to be your inaugural speaker on this, and a pleasure it is to join you and talk about a subject that I think is very important across every organization: data literacy, and the value you can bring not only to individuals, but to the bottom line for most organizations, but also to the end users, the customers that within an organization, and the value we provide to them. A little bit about myself. As Norma said, I'm the head of analytics for human capital at NASA. Working out of the headquarters in DC, also the branch chief for people analytics, where I lead a small team of people analytics data scientists and really take a deep dive into our workforce and understanding what our workforce looks like. It's how it's broken apart, but also how do we train our workforce to be more data literate. So this is very, a subject that's very dear to my heart, and I really look forward to talking about it. So let me share my screen really quick. Are we good to go there? All right.
Ready.
All right, so data literacy. What I want to do today is just give a quick introduction to data literacy, some of the various topics around and concepts around data literacy. We could really go down any number of rabbit holes through any of these subjects, but I just want to give you a brief and easy way of looking at data literacy and how it might benefit your organization. I'd like to first start with a conversation I had recently on LinkedIn. And it really sparked some ideas around data literacy for me and how the workforce or organizations actually look at data literacy. The conversation started, as you can see on the left-hand side, with an individual in LinkedIn talking about what % of headcount should be in data roles. Really taking a look at how many should be actually working with data or understanding data. And I really wanted to say that really shouldn't be looking at it that way. I would suggest that 100% everybody in the organization should have some type of data role. That it's important for them to understand how to read, how to work with, how to analyze, and how to communicate with data. It's which I will show in a little while. That's a common definition across data literacy and what it means. Well, not too long after that, I got a gentleman who took a little issue to the way I said data-driven world, and wanted to get my understanding of why that's important, because he looks at it, it can be any number of things. And I think the concept here that I wanted to get across is that data is not just ones and zeros. It's not an Excel spreadsheet or a database. Data comes to us in many different formats, and we are all using data in any number of ways throughout the day. No matter what we're doing, whether we're driving, going to the grocery store, if we're working at our business and trying to do things, we got various different types of data, and it comes in various different formats. All our senses take in data. So once you think about it that way, then it is a data-driven world, because everything we do is based upon the data we get, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're reading. All of that makes it's important to us, and we're already doing some of this data literacy in our everyday lives. Even when we go to the grocery store to try to look at, do I buy can A or can B, and we take a look at the cost per ounce, all of that is part of data literacy and how we make decisions. What I want to do is focus that into how we use that within an organization to make sure that we are making the decision based on the available data to us, and that we make the best decision for our organization and for our end users and for our customers. So what is data literacy? Well, Professor D'Ignazio out of MIT wrote a paper around this and really looked at data literacy of being the ability to read, work with, analyze, and argue with data. And I agree for the most part, this definition works well for many people. But as a researcher and as a scientist, I understand when I argue with data, I'm really just showing the facts and trying to come up to a conclusion based on the data, maybe with other professionals, other researchers, and other scientists. But in the business world, when we talk about arguing, we're talking about a winner and a loser. And generally, that's not what we want to look at when we talk about data literacy within an organization, within the business side. So I really wanted to change this to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data, because even in her definition, she talked about the larger narrative is intended to communicate some message or story. And that's really what we're trying to do, is communicate the what, the why, and what we can expect from our data, and how that shows us what we can utilize our data. And when we really think about it, it's very necessary within the organization. In a recent survey, and you can see the source there from the article down there, there's a survey where 21%, or actually, let me back up a little bit here. More than 9,000 employees in a variety of roles, or 21%, were confident in their data literacy skills. So really, that's telling us that data literacy is something that's very essential to an organization. It's necessary, and there's a lot of individuals there that don't feel that they have the required skills, even though they're doing it on an everyday level outside of work. So why is this important? How do you define, or how do you utilize that definition of data literacy within your organization? We really need to break it down to the 4 levels of analytics when we're talking about this. And those 4 levels are descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. So when you think about it, the descriptive is what happened. What is this data telling me at this point in time? For the amount of data I collected, whether it's a week, a month, a year, well, how can I describe what I see in that data? Then you get to the next level of diagnostic. Why did this happen? That's where you take that data and try to say, okay, I've seen some patterns here. I'm seeing an issue. Maybe I'm seeing that my trends are going in the wrong direction. Why is this happening? And I can start doing a little bit more analysis, whether it be the correlations or some hypothesis testing. Those are the various things I can do to try to figure out, why is this data telling me this, and why did it happen? Then once I get those 2 together, I can combine them and do a prediction. So I can see what might happen in the future. Based on what I know over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, and understanding why I'm seeing this, can I predict what's going to happen in the future? And then I can take all 3 of those together and do more prescriptive analysis, or make decisions based on all of that information. I know the what, I know the why, I know what might happen, and based on that, I can turn my business into the right direction to make sure I utilize all that data to make the correct data-driven decision. So why does all this matter? Why does data literacy matter, and what are some of the benefits? It really benefits an organizations in so many different ways. First off, it definitely gives you fosters the culture of curiosity. If we start getting more and more data literate, we start thinking more about our data, what's going on, how can I improve things, why are processes happening one way versus another, why do I see differences between one division versus another division doing the same thing. We can start being more curious and start asking these questions that really could measure impact. It could definitely get us all in the right mindset of how we think about things and how we're doing our work across our daily lives. And it also tends for us to start focusing on our desired outcomes for the organization, both from a global aspect, where we're thinking about the outcome from an organization as a whole, or how our individual areas, the outcomes of our individual areas may impact others, as well as the global, and how we benefit the global outcomes by optimizing what we're trying to do. So all of that really starts developing skills within individual people. And as we start developing these different data literacy skills, we start developing ways of being able to think more critical. We understand the data a little bit more. We understand how it's happening, why certain things happen, so that we're able to think critically about that, because we're able to interpret that data better. We know what's going on with that data and understand it better. So then we can start recognizing when things are amiss within our data as we see things moving forward. So we're really starting to gain our skills to a level where we can become detectives, our own detectives of that data, and then bring up the questions that are necessary to the right individuals to say, should we be looking this more a little deeper? Should we take more information? So all of these things are very important, but the biggest thing that I always see with any kind of skill set is that it develops our level of communication with that data. We're able to effectively make decisions or make reasoning behind why something are happening and show a story with that data. All of those things are important in any type of mission that we're trying to accomplish, and these development of these data literacy skills will allow us to do this at a greater impact to the organization, providing more value to that organization. But even if we start looking at this thing, we really have to start data literacy at really understanding where are we now? Where is the organization now? We just can't come in and drop and say, we're going to do a data literacy program. We have to first start off with looking at our skill set across the organization and understanding how data literacy is spread out across the organization. And that's really dependent on the type of roles you have in your organization. So when I'm talking about data literacy, you don't have to be a data scientist to be data literate. Everybody in the organization can be data literate based on their needs and their work role. From a data citizen all the way up to a data scientist, there's many things that we need to, many skills that we need to have to be able to accomplish our daily routines. And some of the basic skills that people should have are things such as being able to understand statistical operations. And I'm not saying being a statistician, just understanding what it means by average or mean or median or range or standard deviation. And I'll give you a classic example of why that's so important just to understand. Recently, was given a presentation to a group of senior engineers at one of the centers. I won't name the center here, but definitely a group of individuals who are leaders in their field, leaders in their areas, and trying to talk about their organization and showing them some descriptive data about their organization. They came across a couple of data fields here that had a couple of averages, and we were comparing two different variables and the average of that variables across. And don't want to get too deep into the actual analysis itself, but one of them was basically was the percentage of how something was happening. And one of them was at 34%, the other one was at 38%. And they focused on that, even though we were trying to get them away from focusing on that area itself. And the reason we told them, because it wasn't a statistically significant difference between those two groups. Well, they didn't understand statistically significant. They didn't understand that why, even though it's 34 and 38, that looks different to them. They should focus in on that, but not having that understanding that basically, even at random, they would be almost equal in the group. The groups were basically equal. We wouldn't need to do any kind of further in depth. We were trying to push them away from an area that would be a waste of time because they weren't different, but they kept focusing on that because they didn't have a complete understanding of statistical significant difference. So in this case, it's important to have those basic skills at all levels of data literacy across the organization. But it's these different skills that you develop are important in different areas. Now, you need to have a good understanding, but you don't need to know how to implement them or actually do the calculations. You just need to know how to read it and how to communicate with it at different levels to make sure you're able to work through your business problems that you may be dealing with. So, but after you do your assessment, then you need to really start thinking about how you develop a vision for data literacy. So this goes more into those who are actually trying to develop this program or this role within an organization. This is an area here where we really need the support of the upper level management. This is not something I believe that can start from the ground up, because it really needs upper management to understand, one, the value of data literacy, what it's going to do to their bottom line if the organization is data literate, and how it can benefit each different process or practices or roles that may be going on in the organization. So you really have to develop your vision for data literacy within an entire data literacy roadmap. And once you do that in developing your goals, and it's an iterative process for you to be able to work through that, you're able to really get your organization to start learning at a much faster pace. It may start off slowly with certain people learning, but as you get more and more advocating for the data literacy knowledge and skill sets that are required, then the organization can really start ramping up that skill set pretty quickly. So to develop a good data literacy vision, you really have to look at it holistically across the organization in developing various different modules and groups and skill sets across that organization. So when you're doing that, you really start to develop a lot of data literacy capabilities. And why is that important here is because that only 24% of business decision makers from junior level manager up to the C-suite, they actually feel that they're confident in the ability to understand or work with or communicate with data. So as you can see, they may have been in business for a long time, but they still have a difficulty trying to understand and read and work with data. They get confused. And I see this all the time as I'm trying to communicate with various leaders across my organization. They have a mindset that may not allow them to think of it differently. And being data literate, you need to be able to open your mindset to other possibilities of how to view that data. And that's where we need to train these individuals to get better skill sets to develop these capabilities. And as I mentioned before, all of these capabilities will help build a data-driven culture. It fosters that culture of curiosity. You get everybody on board. Then you're able to adopt a data first mindset within your organization, where you can start measuring things. Because you start thinking things from a data perspective, you start looking at how can I improve what I'm doing based on the data I'm seeing, and then you're going to understand what you want to achieve with that data. It gives you an idea of how you're going to use that data to really improve upon and add more and more value to your organization through the work that you're doing or your group is doing. So once you start doing the training, you've gotten the vision, you've taken some training, you're really starting to develop a data literacy mindset. And this mindset is critical, I think, to how you look at your work, how you improve, how you add value, and feel better about your work, because you're really starting to make a difference in what you're trying to do. And that mindset can be broken down into 4 different areas, at least in my mind. One, you can become a little bit more curious. Understand, being more data literate, you start getting a little bit more curious about your data. Like, why is my key KPI or key performance indicator, why is that beginning to fall? Or why is it moving? Or why is it different? Or why is the trend going up or down? Or why is my churn so high? You start being curious, start asking these questions, start working with the data more and more. That allows you to become more data literate, but gives you more practice, gives you more ability to answer these questions, then become more creative with that data. What can you do with that data now that you understand it and you've asked these questions? What can you do with that data to be more creative with that, to be able to provide better value to your organization, increase the bottom line, or make our customers happier based on the things that we're doing with our data. But all of those things together allow you to become more, it would allow you to get better in your critical thinking skills. You really understand the data in your workflow, in your domain that you're working with, you're able to really utilize that data and think critically about what are some of the impacts your decisions may have to not only to your workforce, but to your customers, by being able to observe and gather input and strategize from that data that you've already developed and looked at, and seeing how changes you make may impact that data or impact how it's being utilized across your organization. And then lastly, and again, to me, one of the most important things is being able to communicate that information, that data that you perceive, into a story that makes sense not only to you, but to others, and to provide, again, more value to what you're trying to do within your organization, and allows you to make decisions a lot easier based on that story. Communication is the key to many of the things we do, because without it, all the analysis you do, if you can't communicate effectively, all the analysis you do is just a waste of time, because people won't get it. So you need to be able to really practice on your communication and how you show the value of that data and tell that story with that data to anybody you may be sharing it with. So here I'd like to try to just give you a few examples of what I mean by data literacy across those 4 levels of analytics. In the first case here, descriptive. It's the what. You're exploring your data. In this dashboard here, we're just looking at our workforce and how it's broken down, how many employees we have, how many have master's degrees or higher, what's some of the gender specifications, how many veterans do we have, the average age. Again, a descriptive time frame at a point in time that we're looking at. So it's basically looking at one day in this case. What did our workforce look like at the end of this pay period for NASA at this time frame? So now you can start telling a story, and then you can start asking questions. Okay, do I have the right amount of veterans within my workforce? Is that a good target that we're looking for? Okay, I've got an employee age, at 48%, or I got 23% in retirement. Should I start looking into that? And how many people am I going to lose over the next several years, and what do I need to do to make sure I capture their knowledge? So those are the different things you can start asking questions around descriptive, and everyone in the organization should be comfortable working with descriptive data in some way to understand, if not the entire organization, at least their work area. The next level of analytics is the diagnostic side, or the why, to explain it. So you've taken that data, that descriptive data, and now you're starting to do a little bit more of a deep dive into that data. You're trying to figure out, why is this happening, through maybe correlations of some type. You may be looking at if there's a reason why one point is moving up when something happens. Are we losing more customers when we implement this process or this rule or this? So you can understand what's going on. Is there a correlation between what you see and what you're doing, in order to diagnose the problem and then be able to figure out what can I do to change that. And again, anyone in the organization who wants to improve processes or practices should understand diagnostics. And you don't really need to know how to do the diagnostic analysis. You just really know how to understand the results. So again, really, everyone should have some type of understanding of how to do this, just so they can understand why what they're seeing in the data is going on. The next level is prediction, the what plus the why. So you're taking that data that you've got in the descriptive, you understand why it's happening. Based on those two, can you kind of predict what might happen in the future based on that data? So now you're starting to really think about what can I do for the future? What should I see? Should I start making any kind of alterations or decisions in the way I do things based on that data? Now, every persona that I've showcased, from the data scientist all the way down to the data citizen, should be able to at least, again, understand the concept of prediction and what we're trying to do, not necessarily do the analytics, but why it's important for them to understand what this prediction may or may not mean for their group or their organization. And this allows you to be able to start planning ahead to the next level of analytics, which is the prescriptive side, where we start making our data-driven decisions. We start doing a little bit more what-if analysis. If we change this and move this around, what other predictions can we see? What should we be able to do? We can start uncovering different types of possible scenarios with that data, and figuring out, okay, based on these scenarios, what is the right path we should take, and what decisions should we make for our organization in order for us to be able to move to the next level. And in this area, definitely all managers and business leaders at all levels should be able to use this prescriptive analysis to make decisions. But again, everyone should have at least an understanding of what it is, what it means, and why we should be using it, and start learning about it as you're going up the managerial levels, and really being able to improve upon your data literacy to understand how to utilize that data. So that's kind of an overview of data literacy, the high-level concepts. Any one of those slides could probably be broken out into many different concepts or topics and discussions. So feel free to drop us a line, ask us questions. And Norma, I'd like to turn it back over to you.
This was fantastic, David. Thank you so much for this conversation and overview of data literacy, and how can we think about it and grow these activities through our organizations. I'm very curious, you've been working at NASA for over 25 years. Obviously, in those 25 years, computational sort of like power and our use of data and technology has grown tremendously. What are some of the aspects that you've seen have changed when it comes to organizational efforts of what works and what doesn't in this 25 years to drive data literacy as a core function and activity and way of doing things inside an organization like yours?
That's a great question. Thank you. What drives an organization with data literacy? So really, I think for the foremost part is making sure that your workforce itself is comfortable and confident in the work that they're doing, that you've got a workforce that's engaged, and they have some kind of their customer or their satisfaction working with the employer is definitely fine. So you got to make sure your employee workforce is engaged in what they're doing, as well as they have that sense of belonging. So starts with the employees, starts with their knowledge, that workforce, making sure that they feel comfortable with what they're doing. Without that, you can't engage them to learn. And then you have to have a culture of learning. You have the ability to share that how important it is to learn and the opportunity to learn. I've seen too many times where managers focus on getting work done at all costs without giving the employees the opportunity to learn something new. And why that's important, I think, one, you tend to burn out your workforce by doing something like that, and then they start to leave. Secondly, they can't get creative. They can't expand upon their curiosity and one of the things they're trying to do. One of the things I've implemented within my team is that I give them 10% of their work week, or their pay period. So one day a week, or one day every pay period, I allow them to go do something creative, go work on something. Would I like for it to be something around what we're doing? Sure, but anything that they can work on that they feel they want to learn about, whether it's a new technique, a new methodology, or something that they could share with the organization back on what they learn and how it might be useful. So some of the things I've learned is really just to engage your workforce, give them an opportunity to learn, but also put that into their performance plans to a degree, at some kind of level, for them to say, this is, we expect you to learn. We expect you to try to do better and to share that information across, but you also have to lead by example. You have to show as a leader, as a manager, you have to show that you're willing to do the same thing that you're asking them to do.
One of the things that I think is somewhat unique in healthcare is that, and I was discussing with you this before we started the session, the part of the organizations, healthcare delivery organizations, health plan organizations, the proportion of the workforce that uses on their day-to-day tasks